Today I'm making a wedge of cheesecake. I'm beginning with mixing up my batter, putting my batter into a square pan, and I'm going to ultimately use that to cut down the cake to shape my wedge of cheese. Going to push the batter into the corners to make sure that it's spread evenly. This is a vegetable oiled pan. You'll notice I had tried to already cut this once, but I cut it too small. So I redid it and was able to get an appropriate size. So I'm making this a 3-layer wedge of cheese. So I'm having to just kind of place this, make sure that I have enough space for 3 separate layers for my cheese. Using my bench scraper to cut. Then I'm just using the previously cut ones to kind of use as my template for the others. Once I cut these out, I then put them into saran wrap and put them into the freezer for a bit so that I could crumb coat them without getting too much of the cake into the icing. Wanted to firm them up a bit before I started the crumb coat process. I saw this cake on another YouTube channel and I thought this was super cute. So I decided to try it as well. I had never done a cake like this, so just thought I'd give it a shot. After they were finished chilling, I took them back out of the freezer, and then I did level them out just a little bit, not a whole lot, but wanted to get them a little bit more level than what they were in the pan so that I could begin to stack them. Here I have begun to stack them. Admittedly, I should have used a different recipe for my cake. This was not quite dense enough. So I had a bit of struggle getting this crumb coat on. I did have to chill this quite a few times to get this to the way that I wanted to be able to do it without the cake breaking apart. But eventually it got done, so it worked out. And lessons learned for next time too. You can see I'm having a little bit of challenge here covering this cake. And it was right about there that I decided that I needed to put that back into the chiller to get it a little bit more cold. And here it is a bit more cold. I did cut this down a bit to make it a bit smaller than what it was initially. So you'll see that I am re-crumb coating this side. But it is more sturdy of a cake now. And now my crumb coat is done, and so I'm beginning to just kind of smooth this out a little bit. I was still having a little bit of trouble on this left-hand side, but was ultimately able to get it firmed up and fixed to how I wanted it to be. Here I had put this into the chiller a bit so that I would be able to smooth this a little bit better after doing the crumb coat. At this point, we're at a place where it's feeling much more secure, and I'm able to actually really work with the cake. Up until this point, it was quite difficult. And now I'm beginning to add some color to this cheese, and I was really starting to have fun with this cake at this point. Wanted this to be a really vibrant color, so I made this quite yellow. I really liked the color that came out here. I was putting the icing on pretty quick here because later I will be making some divots into that. Here I am beginning to form some fondant to make further decorations. I'm going to be making a mouse to put on top of this, so I am forming his ear in this particular instance, but you'll see me shaping his head and some other elements for the decor of this cake. And this is his head. I'm kind of just pinching on this ball of fondant at the front to pull that point of a mouse's nose little by little so that I don't make indentations in the fondant. So it's just a smooth point. When I do start to see any kind of indentations, I just kind of rub smoothly along that space. And there's the point of his nose. I just set his body to the side. I got some pink food coloring here. I'm going to dye some pink so that I can make the pink in his ears and his hands and feet and his tail. I'm just using a round fondant punch. I'm going to take those little things and put them, those little pink pieces, and put them on top of the white ears with some water, and then press them down so that they kind of take up more space on the white ear. You'll see here I'm using a fondant tool and I'm just making indentation for the sockets where his eyes will be. And I'm flattening where his head will sit on his body. Flattening a little bit where his ears will set, and also flattening the bottom of each of the ears where I will get them wet and place his ears. Doing the same to the other ear as well. I did opt to take a little piece of, well, actually here I am using 3 toothpicks, one larger and 2 smaller ones so that it'll better brace his head onto his body. I'm just going to put that on top of there and push those toothpicks into his body. And there we go. One regret I had after I was done with this cake was that I made his back flat. I wish I would have made his body and torso more round. And here you see I am putting his, well, actually just kind of testing to see where his ears are going to rest. But then ultimately I do opt to use a small toothpick to help hold that ear in place on his head, along with the water that I used as well. And I'm going to do the same thing and put a second ear on his head. And reshaping those ears, and there's the start of my mouth. Now I am taking just some small rolled up balls for his eyes, and then I will also make some even smaller balls of white just to put that little glare that's often, oh, I'm sorry, here I'm actually doing his little pink nose. And I also opt to use a small toothpick here as well. Tracing his mouth, give him a bit of a smile. And there his little nose fell off, which is what made me decide to use a small piece of toothpick to help hold that on there. I'm putting his little eyes on. Started to have a little bit of fondant color bleed here, so I was using a paper towel to help keep that from happening any more than what was already happening. You'll see I'm using this paper plate. I'm using like where the plate lifts up to help hold his ears up a little bit so that they don't drip or drift back. And there's where I'm putting that little white glare into his eyes. Gives a little bit of depth to his personality. And now I'm working on his little feet. I'm using a round fondant punch, but then I'm drawing with the other tool just some toes onto that round piece of fondant that I just punched out. And again, I did decide to use a small piece of toothpick to hold that in. This cake is for at home, so I wasn't too concerned about there being a toothpick in this fondant work. Here's where I'm drawing those little toes on. All right. And here I have already formed that piece of cheese that I'm going to have the mouse holding. And I put some little indentations into the cheese for the holes in the cheese. I've added some water to help that stick to the mouse's belly, as well as a toothpick to hold that into place. And I'm just trying to get some more water into underneath that piece of cheese. I am forming now his little arms that are going to drape around the piece of cheese so that he's holding on to that block of cheese. And I'm going to use some water to hold that into place. And we're doing the second arm to help hold that piece of cheese in place. Okay, there we go. He's all finished. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create his tail, which I will add once we get him on top of the cake. But we'll get that created now. Now I'm moving back and just smoothing out the the icing on this cake so that we can begin to do the next steps. Just wiping some of that excess icing off of the cake board so that it's not messy and doesn't look unkept. Here you'll see that I had cut some indentations out of the icing. I had mentioned that I was putting the icing on pretty thick. That's because I knew that I was going to be using the icing to create the indentations for the holes in the cheese. So I'm going to be doing this across the entirety of the whole cake. You can see some of them as I'm working through this process. And to create these holes, I'm using just a regular spoon. I'm just kind of dragging it across the icing to pull that icing out of the hole. And then in some cases, like I just did there, I'm using my finger to smooth up the hole that's left behind. Using my finger here to smooth out some of those indentations that I have made. You'll notice I did not put any indentation or holes on that back panel, and that's because we're simulating that this is a wedge of cheese cut from a cheese wheel, and they typically have that case. So right now I'm putting some orange to simulate that orange case that a cheese wheel is in. I'm also going to line that along the bottom of the cheese wheel or the cheese wedge as well. I'm wiping the excess off of the cheese portion of this cake. And then I'm going to also smooth that orange icing down as well. Cleaning up the cake board a little bit. And here's where I'm starting to line that along the side of either side of this wedge of cheese. Here's where I think it's really starting to look like what I'm trying to achieve. I really love this cake. I'm just smoothing it out as best I can so it looks nice and neat. And here I'm using 3 toothpicks and I'm putting my mouse up on top of this cake. And of course he's holding on to that piece of cheese and he's sitting on a piece of cheese. Here's what he looks like from the front, and I'm preparing to put his little tail on as well. So we're just about done with this cake. If you enjoyed watching this and you'd like to see me attempt to make some other cakes, I would love if you would subscribe to my channel. Come back again, like, subscribe, and share for your friends. Maybe someone else would get some enjoyment out of watching as well. Here is what he looks like, taking a spin on my decorating wheel. And this was such a joy to make. I've already heard from several people that have seen this that this is their favorite cake to date. Again, I would love if you would come back again, like, comment, and share. Feel free to tell your friends about something you find on my channel. Thank you again. Have a great